exist when I was in law school. I'm not going to speak for you, but what an opportunity to do what you're doing for that company, which is one of the most significant companies in the world in the information age. And African American lawyers here, right here, has an opportunity to play a significant role in that company. And forgive me, but from the looks of it, well paid. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But the issues of race still remain with us, nonetheless. I could tell you about work over the years that I have done and others have done with the NAACP People's Defense Fund here in this region, and I can broaden it and talk about other civil rights lawyers. And many of you may know about the Tulia, Texas case here in the Panhandle. How many of you know about the Tulia case? So this is a case about 7 or 8 years ago. Tulia is a small town in the Panhandle here in Texas. And one morning before dawn, a pre-dawn raid by the police in which 10% of the black population of this tiny town arrested, charged with drug violations, crack, powder cocaine, mostly crack cocaine, all on the word of one undercover police officer, who later is proven to be racist and corrupt. No drugs, no weapons, no money found. And yet, ultimately, pleas or sentences with prison terms of 20 to 300 years. The kingpin, allegedly, a poor black hog farmer. I've seen this man's house, as one of his fellow white farmers said, who was supportive of him. If he was a drug kingpin, he buried the money somewhere because he sure enough didn't spend it. We were able to eventually get those folks working as part of a coalition out of jail, but not before many of them spent a great deal of time. Racism. Racism here in Texas in the 21st century. I can talk about the first capital punishment case I did many years ago, which was over in Louisiana. Client was in Angola, but the individual came from here, from Houston. I could talk in great detail about that case or many other cases like it. I could talk about the Lincoln Parish school desegregation case I worked on right across the border in Louisiana, or Point Capit Parish near Baton Rouge. Could talk about the Grambling, Louisiana Tech case in which we were trying to get resources for that HBCU. And the inequality that still existed when I worked on that case in the late 20th century, and that still exists today. Anybody familiar with those institutions know what I'm talking about, but you don't have to go over there. You can look right here, where we sit, and right down the road. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. See the inequalities at these higher educational institutions funded with public money. We could talk about voting rights cases in Louisiana and in Texas, one of which will eventually come out of whatever Judge Gilmore is working on, no doubt about it. I could talk about Hopwood, case she mentioned, higher education. Time doesn't permit me to do so. All I can do is tell you, and forgive me for being immodest, that I've been in the middle of many of those battles. I was in the middle of the Hopwood battle, and the Michigan affirmative action case that went to the Supreme Court. That case, the plan that was upheld is a plan that was adopted. This is really immodest, but it's also the truth. Only as a consequence of a conversation that I initiated with the then Dean of Michigan Law School when I was teaching there for 3 years, Lee Bollinger, went on to become the president of the University of Michigan's named defendant in the Michigan cases, in which I told him that I thought that the university was not complying with the Bakke case, which is the only governing decision we had about affirmative action in higher education. And I was engaged in conversations with people down here at UT about their plan, which, with all due respect, and you can determine how much respect was due, was basically pursued in a way that UT was putting a target, bullseye on its head, saying, come sue us. I'm not going to speculate as to why they did it that way, but they were clearly out of compliance with Bakke. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out or to tell them that, yet they didn't change their plan, and we see what happened as a consequence. All of these cases involve not only issues that are past, but issues that are present. If I had more time, I would tell you why, even though we won in Michigan an important victory, the victory in some ways was not enough for me. I would tell you why what we won in Michigan was the reaffirmance of Bakke, and why Bakke was, at the time it was decided, a loss for African Americans and remains a loss today. I would tell you about the the mixed feelings I had about the whole diversity theory, upon which now all efforts to include people who have historically been excluded, was adopted. The short version is this. Affirmative action didn't start out of a discourse about diversity. It started because of a compelling remedial rationale for undoing what happened in the past that had present-day effects. And Justice Powell, God bless him and rest his soul, in Bakke, the swing vote, could not find his way to affirm affirmative action on that basis. And so what he did was come up with this diversity theory that lies not in the interest of African American students and other people of color having access to higher education, but in the institution's First Amendment interest in academic freedom and having them around because it benefited the education of white students. And I would tell you about why that's short-sighted and the consequences of why that's not enough. It's not that I don't think there's anything to it, but there's not enough to it. And we completely reject the remedial rationale, which still should have compelling legitimacy. It's kind of like, most of you didn't see this movie because you're too young. How many of you saw Mississippi Burning? Oh my goodness. Okay, so y'all are not all that young. So here's the problem with Mississippi Burning, as you know. Hollywood couldn't tell, and there are many other examples. Cry of Freedom, the same thing. Many other examples. So some people say that, same thing. Hollywood couldn't tell a story about black people except through the eyes of white people. Like there isn't enough. And so Mississippi Burning, the FBI, the heroes of the Civil Rights Movement in Mississippi, come on. The FBI was many things in Mississippi, but with all due respect, not the heroes of the Civil Rights Movement. Black folks, aided and supported by some white folks, some of whom lost their lives. But black folks were the primary agents of their own liberation in Mississippi. What Justice Powell did in the Bakke case in some ways was exhibit the inability to get at the real underlying problem by going at the concerns and through the concerns of African Americans and what had happened. You get that? You see what I'm saying? And it has real consequences even today. So don't have time to go into all of that. I can tell you that two things quickly, and then I'll close. One is that as a civil rights lawyer, I've had the most rewarding career that I could possibly have. It's taken me all around the world. I've been to South Africa and worked with folks who were building a new world society there, post-apartheid age. And I can call the names of some of those liberation leaders there whom I've been honored to know. You know, I've been to Japan and met with and worked with lawyers who were trying to build employment discrimination law. And there's a lot of problems in Japan when it comes to labor law and employment discrimination. I've had the opportunity to travel to Brazil and meet with Afro-Brazilian lawyers to talk about issues including higher education, affirmative action in Brazil, but other issues. I've traveled to Eastern Europe and worked with the Roma. If you don't know who they are, pejoratively they're called gypsies. They experience awful discrimination. People look to the experience of African Americans, including the Roma, all over the world. How did you do it, they ask? Well, we're not done yet. But we can talk about our struggles, and then they can decide whether there's anything useful or not. But it's important for us to connect to them because we can learn from them too. It's a two-way street. I've had opportunities that I just couldn't even begin to tell you about as a consequence of being a civil rights lawyer, even though when I came out of law school, some people at Columbia Law School thought that if you went into civil rights law, it was because you couldn't get a job at a big law firm, that it was second-rate lawyering in some ways. Just as importantly, I've had the opportunity to meet people, and forgive me for doing this, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to tell you why. And I can't do them justice, and I'll leave some people out, but meet people who are among the greatest Americans, and certainly the greatest lawyers in this country, and among the greatest of our people who have struggled in the courts and outside of the courtroom. Now, I can't do justice to the clients, the many clients I could call a roll of them. But let me tell you about some of the lawyers, some of the names you'll know, some you don't. You know who Thurgood Marshall was. I think who Jack Greenberg was. He was Thurgood Marshall's successor, the only white person to lead the legal defense fund. Controversial, but a great civil rights lawyer. You know who Bob Carter was. Bob Carter, who's still with us now, a senior federal district court judge in the Southern District of New York. Bob Carter is as responsible for Brown versus Board of Education as anybody was, dead or alive. You know, one of the great lawyers.